Okay, let's dive into this. We're going to unravel the long and, well, pretty complex relationship between Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. We're using a whole bunch of recently released documents and some really extensive reporting to piece together a story that stretches over decades, from these lavish parties all the way to a massive political firestorm.
You know, this quote from Donald Trump, way back in 2002, it really sets the stage for everything. It's this incredibly candid peek into a friendship that seemed to be defined by, well, shared tastes. But what was just a casual remark back then would eventually, years later, become the absolute center of a major political crisis.
And a crisis is exactly what it became. Fast forward to 2025, and according to reporting from the Daily Pioneer, this decades-old friendship had basically corroded the very foundation of Trump's political persona. You know, that carefully built image of him as the anti-elite outsider who was fighting a corrupt system.
So the big question is, how did we even get here? In 2025, when thousands of documents were released, Trump's name popped up over 100 times, and it directly contradicted years of his own denials. The political pressure, it became immense, even causing fractures in his own support base. To really get it, we've got to go back to the very beginning.
So let's start at the beginning. The whole relationship reportedly kicked off in the late 1980s. They were neighbors in Palm Beach, and it really blossomed throughout the 90s. This was an era defined by these over-the-top parties, a lot of mutual admiration, and socializing at the highest levels.
And this timeline, wow, it really shows you just how intertwined their lives were. This was not just some passing acquaintance. Look at these key moments. A party at Mar-a-Lago in '92, then you've got at least 7 confirmed flights on Epstein's private jet, a personally signed book from Trump calling him the greatest, and then, in 2000, a direct link to Virginia Giuffre being recruited right from Trump's own property.
And yeah, that 1992 party, it wasn't just a rumor. There's actual NBC footage that caught this moment, with Trump whispering to Epstein, who then just laughs. This video really cemented their public association, and it gave everyone a stark visual record of the dynamic between these two men.
But the friendship didn't last forever. It eventually went sour. And what's really telling is that the first cracks started to show not because of Epstein's criminal behavior, but over a high-stakes business deal.
So in 2004, they suddenly became business rivals, both going after the same Palm Beach mansion at an auction. Trump ended up winning, and some reports claim this was basically the beginning of the end for them. But the final, official break, that wouldn't happen for another 3 years, and it was after a really serious incident at Mar-a-Lago itself.
Trump reportedly banned Epstein from Mar-a-Lago back in 2007, and the reason was that Epstein had allegedly harassed a teenage girl there. Now, this is a really key point. Years later, Trump would claim he was not a fan of Epstein, but this ban only happened after Epstein's behavior had already gotten the attention of law enforcement in Palm Beach.
Now, we need to address some deeply disturbing material that has come to light. The Justice Department released these old FBI tip files, and they contain some shocking, and I have to stress, unverified allegations. One tip mentioned a claim of rape. Another came from a woman who alleged she was trafficked to Trump when she was just 13 and witnessed a truly horrific crime. It's absolutely crucial to state that we don't know if the FBI ever investigated these specific tips.
So, in response to this growing scandal, the Trump administration's strategy was pretty clear. Frame the whole thing as a political attack. He called it the Jeffrey Epstein hoax, basically arguing that it was all just a deflection tactic being used by his political opponents. And that brings us right back to the political firestorm of 2025. This thing just exploded in Washington. After months of trying to avoid it, the administration was forced into a confrontation, with pressure just mounting from every single side.
And one of the biggest sources of that pressure was this glaring contradiction. See, during his 2024 campaign, Trump had actually promised he would release the Epstein files. But then, once he was in office, his administration fought tooth and nails to keep them sealed. This created a huge backlash, even among some of his most loyal supporters who felt, well, betrayed.
And if you want a perfect illustration of just how intense that pressure became, look at this. Congress responded with something called the Epstein Files Transparency Act. What this chart shows us is the House vote, 427 to 1. That is an incredibly rare, just overwhelming show of bipartisanship that made the administration's position totally impossible to maintain. So, facing this new political reality, with his back against the wall, Trump completely reversed his position just one day before that big vote. He publicly called on Republicans to release the files, claiming they had nothing to hide. It was a really stark turnaround after months of resistance.
Now, the released emails didn't actually show any direct communication with Trump, but they did contain dozens of damaging claims coming from Epstein himself. In his own words, he called Trump the dog that hasn't barked. He claimed Trump spent hours with Virginia Giuffre, and he even told an associate, "I am the one able to take him down."
So for a lot of people watching this, the core damage here isn't necessarily legal, it's deeply political. Just like the Daily Pioneer argued, these revelations have shattered that carefully crafted image. The story he told about being the outsider fighting the system, well, for many, he's now seen as part of it.
And so that leaves us with this final, lingering question. According to that same reporting, every single appeal Trump makes in the future about morality, about fighting elite corruption, is now going to be met with one single, powerful challenge from critics and maybe even supporters alike. Why did you lie about Epstein?